Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Today I'm here to share my entire drawing process with you guys. This video is sponsored by Clip Studio Paint, but as you all probably know, I've been drawing with Clip Studio Paint for over 4 years now and have always used CSP on all my videos since then. So I'm very happy for this opportunity to share my processes today. Although I'll be using CSP in this video, most of the contents here is not limited to CSP, and hopefully you guys too can gain something from this video, even if you use other drawing programs. Now let's get into it. So here I've been sketching an adult version of my OC. The initial idea is, she's wearing a pair of lily earrings while holding a lily flower in her hand. In the sketch, I try to at least get the flow of the hair, drapery, and flower. After the sketch is done, you can click on this thing over here to turn the sketch blue and make it easier for line arting. For the line art and pretty much almost everything else, I'm using a brush named Square Texture Brush, which I'll link in the description below. I'm not focusing too much on the line art here, because I tend to repaint over the line art later on anyways. For some objects like the sun and leaves here, I prefer to just block out the color instead of drawing the lines, because it's easier to get the form right that way. So the way I work is, I put on some base colors below my line art, and then before moving on to the shading, I try to figure out the mood and lighting I want for the piece. Here I'm aiming for a backlit warm lighting. For the shadows part, I'm using a blue multiply layer on top of the whole drawing. And for the lighting, instead of erasing parts of the multiply layer, I slowly brush some orange with an add layer above the shadow. If you are aiming to achieve a semi-realistic lighting, it is important to recognize the object's forms and contours. So I encourage everyone to practice a lot and look for references for how light looks when it falls on the skin, on drapery, and on other materials. Lastly, I'm adding a gradient map with warm colors on top of the whole drawing to further set the warm mood. After the rough lighting is established, I start to do the shading. I try to do the face shading lightly, since we already have the rough lighting from earlier. For hair shading, I start with the base color as the highlight, and gradually add darker colors as the mid-tone and shadow. Just try to think of the whole hair as a ball shape, and try to retain the form of a ball with your shading. Here you'll see that a lot of the hair parts are actually repainted above the line art layer. I'm personally not a big line art person, and somehow as I develop my style more, I started feeling like my line art kind of limits me from doing more details, especially on the hair. I just like adding stray pieces of hair for a natural and dainty feel. You'll notice that I tend to add light colors around where the hair meets the skin, and here at the part of the hair that is further from the camera. I do this mainly because of two reasons. First, it is a stylistic choice. I think the lighter color gives depth into the picture and makes the layer of the hair more distinguishable. Second, because it's in a backlight setting, and in a backlight setting, the hair strands in the back gets a lot of light exposure. We're going to keep building the hair layers and details. For the eyes, I use multiply layer on top of the eye white so that the eyes blends in with the eye whites naturally. Draw the iris of the eye with a brush that is not 100% opaque. Then add the reflection of her eyelashes and the highlights on the pupil and the bottom part of the iris. Now I'm continuing to do more detailing on the face and the eyes. I moved the crease of her eyelids a bit to the top to give her eyes a calmer feel. And for the face detailing too, we are doing a lot of touch-ups by repainting above the Lineart layer. For her mouth, I'm trying to do some Korean gradient lips makeup on. And lastly, for the face, I add some light reflection on the eyes and lips. After testing how the face would look with the lighting setup, I feel like I didn't quite get the nose right, so I decided to just simplify the form like this. Also, it feels like the eyelids are a bit too aggressive, so we're going to make the eyelids blend more with the rest of the skin by adding an orangish color to the tip of the eyelids. I'm going to do the same to the bottom eyelid there. Let's tidy up the overall face rendering and we'll be done with the face. Now we can start to shade her shirt. Since we set this piece to a warm mood, we'll use a warm gray as the mid-tone. When shading the shirt creases, make sure to keep the light source and the form of the body in mind. It is also important to know and control the hardness of the blending, just like this. Now some people have been asking, how do I do the chromatic fringe effect? Chromatic fringe is a line of saturated color where light and shadows meet. I used to do it manually by brushing a bright orange color lightly onto the shadows line. But nowadays, if I'm trying to save time, I just use an auto action set by Let It Body on CSP Asset Store. For blending, I usually use the default blend tool, but sometimes I try to manually do it with my painting brush by picking a color in the middle of the midtone and the shadow and brushing it between them. Sometimes I also use a textured blending brush so that the blending is not too boring. Now let's finalize the shading by adding highlights to help accentuate the form of the bow. And also add some ambient occlusion on where the bow rests on the shirt. Now I'm cleaning up the rough lighting we made in the beginning of the video by blending it. I decided that I wanted to add some stray hair pieces here, so I added some with a darker color to add some sense of depth into the hair. Also, I just realized that the form of the hair was a bit off around this part, so I fixed the direction of the shading. And lastly, I popped tone curve to correct the colors a little. Now we go back to the hand. I'm going to do simple shading, making sure that the shading on the hand matches the shading on the face. I also try to make the color as close as possible to the face with eyedropper tool. For the sleeve, it's pretty much the same as the shirt. Brush the form of the sleeve with a soft airbrush, start with the rough shading and continue by blending them. You can also add chromatic fringe if you want to be extra in your rendering. I was kinda unhappy with the flower, so I decided to use a reference side by side. I didn't want to stress on the flower too much, so I'm just following the shapes and colors loosely. Even when we are using a reference, keep in mind on the color scheme and lighting setup of the whole piece. So don't forget to draw the flower pestle and stamen. Now moving on to the flower stem. I'm also adding some light textures to the leaves. The flower stem is not the main focus of the piece, so it's okay to just do it lightly and not overdo it. To finish the flower part, I'm adding a part of the finger that I missed and cleaning up the flower rendering. Okay, now let's move on to the background. I just wanted to try out the new CSV panorama feature. All you have to do is drag the asset into your canvas, and you can rotate the 3D panorama to an angle that you like. Guys, I promise I do make my own background usually, but this is a really amazing feature that I think you guys should know, because it's really beautiful and super time saving. To boost the emotional feel of this piece, I'm also adding some falling ginkgo leaves around her. Don't forget to add some cast shadow on the piece of leaf that falls on her head, and add some detailing on other piece of leaves, but not too much. Now moving on to the earrings that I've put off doing for the longest time. I matched the base colors of the earrings with the lily flower, except that the earring has a more shiny metallic material. Give some glow on the earring with an add layer to give it more attention. I decided that I want the lighting on the face to be more distributed, so I simply fixed it on the lighting layer. And this is why I like to separate the lighting layer from the original colors layer. Lastly, to finish off with the piece, I'm using CSP's new liquify function to fix any deformations in the character. And adding Gaussian blur to some of the hair pieces to give it some sense of motion. And we're finished! Thank you guys so much if you watched until this point. I learned new things and found new resources as I was drawing this, and I hope you do too! Lastly, thank you again to Clip Studio Paint for making this video possible. Let me know if you want to see more videos like this and what topic should we do next. I'll see you guys next time!